San Diego will now travel to Los Angeles to start the National League Division Series against the Dodgers on Tuesday. The Padres went 5-14 against the Dodgers this season, and they've been the little brother in the rivalry long before 2022, having lost every season series in 2011.
So, okay, we're going into the Mannix Brothers Hour. This is Catch Up with Coach. I am Malik Hall, Coach Malik Hall, that is. And here we go. We have the Mannix Brothers at 1. Check them out on the Big Jab. Mannix at the midday. Here we go.
Call 207-775-2217 or 1-866-811-9505.
Good guy, my friend. I mean, brother is French.
I don't know why I know that. I took 4 years of Spanish.
You know hermano?
You know hermano?
As in,
I don't know why I know that.
The Mannix begins now. Here's Jeff and Taylor.
You're going to fail and bomb and gag and fail and bomb.
Yalla, let's go. Good afternoon. Welcome back to Middays with Mannix and Mannix on 96.3 WJJB, the Big Jab on a Mannix Monday. Happy to have you on board, and we open up our final hour, as we always do, with a college football discussion. Former college football coach and the host of the Catch Up with Coach podcast, Malik Hall, joins us on the line right now. Malik, thanks for jumping on again. How are you?
Glad to be here, boys. Glad to be here. Midday with the Mannix Brothers.
Yes, gotta love that. And so we have another flip-flop at the number 1 spot in the national rankings. Last week we were on here, at least I was, complaining that Georgia got unseated because of a close come-from-behind victory. Well, now it's reversed. Alabama gets a close win at home and gets unseated as number 1 by Georgia. Although Alabama not only goes to 2, they go all the way down to 3. What say you about the top 3 teams in the country at this point? Are they ranked correctly?
You know, again, like last week, I think the ranking is based on their performance week in, week out, barring that all of them win. And right now they are. And based on the difficulties of their opponent, you know, right now, considering Georgia, you know, they handled Auburn. And then what we all were hoping would happen, Alabama beat Texas A&M, not convincingly, but they're playing with a freshman quarterback. So the margin of error was high considering the turnovers. And Texas A&M, and unfortunately, it is not being credited to Texas A&M's defense of creating those turnovers. Is more credited to Alabama was playing with a freshman quarterback who still yet and still is talented. But yeah, I think Texas A&M, and they converted on all of their turnovers, which is more important. And so time of possession, Alabama still owned, but the turnovers always change the tide of the game. But Alabama, you really have to get them really, really down for them to not overcome any of the challenges you present. And so all things considered, Texas A&M played okay. I mean, considering, you know, I don't think much of them this year. And I think they got a long road ahead of them in this game. You know, they competed with Alabama for 4 quarters. So, but yeah, they got the order right now, and it's going to shift again. Who does Alabama, you know, considering it's going to keep shifting until Ohio State and Michigan play, barring that Michigan beats Penn State next week, right? And depending on how they beat Penn State, they may jump Ohio State. Until Michigan, Ohio State play, and until Georgia, Auburn play, and barring that they all go undefeated up into those matchups, I think it's going to keep shifting. It's going to be like the Dow Jones, up, down, up, down.
Well, and I'll ask a little bit about Ohio State here. And again, I will say King, the quarterback there for A&M this weekend, I actually liked his play. I know he was 25, 46, 253, 2 TDs, but I thought he had a couple good throws there watching him play. He played his butt off. But I want to talk a little Ohio State. We just had a caller call in, and we were kind of debating Ohio State, defending his Ohio State. Jeff and I aren't really too high on him, but, you know, C.J. Stroud great quarterback, 21 of 26 in that win, 6 touchdowns, 361 yards. Can't deny that. Really, a lot of weapons on Ohio State. Are they for real? Because, I mean, look, Bama and Georgia up there, the SEC, but Ohio State and Michigan, you know, Jeff and I were saying, who you got? The best 1 or 2 in the SEC or the best 1 or 2 in the Big Ten?
Right. I mean, you know, listen, Ohio State is, I think Ohio State is legit. I think they're legit. They have dealt with all of their opponents. Notre Dame probably was their closest victory gap. Outside of that, they're averaging almost 50 points a game. And so if there was a doubt of, you know, where you're going in terms of conference, I'm going to say you go SEC, but I'm saying Ohio State is that real deal. Michigan, on the other hand, I think Michigan has proven themselves to be they sustain the hardball effect. And so is he going to go? Is he going to stay? Should we fire him? Should we rehire him? Whatever. So I think you're seeing what longevity gets you if you buy into the coach and the development that he has in mind for the program. So that's going to be a game to watch. I wish I could tell you Michigan looks good enough to beat Ohio State. I don't think they are, but I'm a Michiganian. But yeah, I think Ohio State is just on fire, and I think the Stroud kid is a Heisman guy. I think the Heisman candidate, I think next week is when they start to really start talking about it, because we'll be in the 3rd week of conference play. But I think the Stroud kid is legit. I think the Hooker kid from Tennessee is legit. And so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Should be very, very interesting to see how it plays out. Michigan, of course, winning at Indiana this week, 31-10. Now to play number 10, Penn State at home this week. I mean, that seems like maybe the biggest college football game so far this season anyway, although I think Tennessee and Alabama might argue for that here too, since they play next week as well. But what do you think we're going to learn about Michigan and Penn State, and maybe a little bit more about how the Big Ten might shake out from that game coming up at the Big House here on Saturday?
Okay, so I think this is a tale of both programs, the Big Ten. I think James Franklin has done a great job considering where Penn State was, where they are now. Both coaches stayed. Whether they had opportunities to leave, they stayed. And they're at this point where they need to get over the hump. Unfortunately, it's my Michigan Wolverines that James Franklin has to try to get over the hump on. They're at the Big House. I think that's going to be a telltale game for Michigan more than it will be Penn State, solely based on ranking. But if you are Penn State, you are excited about where you are ranking-wise. You knock off a number 5 Michigan, okay, and you keep rolling. And now you know Michigan still has to play Ohio State. I don't even think Penn State plays Ohio State this year, but be that as it may, no, they don't. And so they're in a really good position, so they finish off Michigan, Minnesota, they do play Ohio State. Right after they beat Michigan, they go Minnesota and Ohio State. Minnesota just won last week, so it'll be a telltale for both programs. But it's a bigger game for Michigan. It's at home, and they just lost their running back coach, Coach Hart. So it's going to be a tough one. Though Crum is doing almost 170 yards a game, you can almost bet Penn State and Coach Diaz and Coach Franklin over there be well prepared for the run game.
Yeah, and let's take a look over at the Big 12 now. Obviously, Kansas was 5-0, getting served their first loss. TCU remains undefeated. Kansas State also getting a win. And then, of course, I think maybe, I don't know if it's one of the more, I guess, surprising results, but Oklahoma State, again, remains undefeated, 41-31, and then Texas beating up on Oklahoma. I mean, what a week it was in the Big 12. A lot of big results, a lot of surprises, but also some things that maybe we kind of expected. And for TCU, undefeated, still rolling. That's a big win for their program.
Listen, the Big 12 is full of, the only program to me in the Big 12 right now that you alluded to was Oklahoma State. they're they're undefeated. They're 5-0, 2-0 in the Big 12. But every other team in the Big 12 has been full of surprises. Kansas, Kansas was undefeated prior to this. They spanked the Sooners. This is a situation where the Texas program, yeah, they shut Oklahoma out 49-0. But then again, I'm not I'm not sold on Texas, all things considered. And I thought Oklahoma was gonna be a legitimate team this year. And so you figure Oklahoma is now trying to figure it out coming off of, now they're 0-3 in the Big 12. The last time they've been 0-3 in conference, I couldn't tell you. And then you have Kansas State who's come back. They're 3-0 in the Big 12. And so TCU is kind of been that program that has always been quiet, but very sneaky, but very competitive. Very sneaky, but competitive. Outside of that, it's just the Big 12 is wide open, man. Oklahoma State, I love coaching the mullet over there. So all things, he's been the most consistent thing in the Big 12 with all of the coaching changes. So I only expect him to really run the conference, run the table in the conference, but to see who pushes the envelope on it will be interesting.
Yeah, it could be real interesting here as well. And sticking with kind of the conference thing here, business taken care of by the USC Trojans in the Pac-12, although I'm happy my Cougs played with them for a half on the road, while UCLA, that seemed to be a statement win against Utah here as the Bruins remain unbeaten now overall and in the Pac-12.
So Chip Kelly, maybe because we're out east and we're not getting all of the noise that comes with Chip Kelly, but for somehow, some way, he's been able to really go undefeated, 3-0 in the Pac-12 and quietly do it. No one's really talking about UCLA. They're averaging 40-something points a game. Really, they're averaging 37 points a game. In the game that, to your point, Jeff, USC, that's going to be an interesting showdown. And then can Oregon, because Oregon is still, I think, very, very impressive. Their only losses to the Bulldogs. And so the Pac-12 finish is going to be interesting too, considering UCLA is in the dance this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, and looking at USC too, they're number 6-0. They got the 30-14 win over Washington State. Caleb Williams, obviously one of the better quarterbacks in the country. And I think it's interesting because I guess, there's not many other ACC teams to talk about, so we'll group in number 5 Clemson with this number 6 question with USC. They had a 31-3 victory over Boston College this weekend and looked pretty convincing doing it. I mean, Malik, where do you look at these number 5 and 6 teams? Are they legit contenders for those top 4 spots, especially with them taken by Big Ten and SEC teams? Well, here, of course, is the Pac-12 and the ACC knocking on the door of the top 4.
Yeah.
Who do you think has the best chance so far from what you've seen between USC and Clemson to really push that top 4 of Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama?
I think per ranking, I think Clemson will have the easier path to that spot. Just considering the conference play, USC is on fire. So considering USC has to beat a UCLA, still has to beat a Oregon. And so to me, I think the back end of that number 4 spot for USC is getting more challenging. Whereas I think for Clemson, they beat Florida State. They beat Wake Forest. Like right now, they should really, if they hold the line and nothing silly happens. DJ is still working out some kinks. He's thrown some questionable balls that have been like, who were you throwing it to? Now, whether that's a miscommunication by the receiver, whether it was because they're in a loud stadium, that will come to bite you in a tight game in the ACC. But I think USC's path is going to be much more difficult as we close out the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more here there. I want to ask, too, about a couple programs in the SEC, and I think they get overshadowed at the moment by Alabama and Georgia with good reason. But also unbeaten are the Tennessee Volunteers at number 6 and the Ole Miss Rebels at number 9. Do either of those teams, with Tennessee, we're really going to see it because they're hosting Alabama this week.
Yep.
But do either of those teams, do you think they can stack up with the Alabama and the Georgia?
Woo! I'm voting Tennessee to stack up to Alabama, especially if Bryson doesn't play before Ole Miss. I like Ole Miss. I love Coach Kiffin over there, but Vandy almost had him, and then Kiffin just turned on the juice, and they put up 50 points out of nowhere. It's like, oh, I was watching it. I flipped it. I was like, oh, my goodness, Ole Miss might go down after beating Kentucky. And they pulled the game out. But the Tennessee, listen, this Hendon Hooker, this dude's a problem. And so I expect Alabama to be ready for everything he brings to the party. But it's going to be a tough one. And I think for him, you beat Alabama or you push at Alabama, you almost secure your spot. Excuse me. Easy as a draft pick, but most likely as a Heisman finalist. Or now, nothing stupid has to happen by you losing to, somebody that you shouldn't lose to. I want to, losing to South Carolina, for example, because South Carolina just beat Kentucky, and Kentucky had a shot to kind of rebound and take their one loss and hope it pans out. Now they're going 2 losses. So if they can handle Alabama, they should be able to get this done, even if they take a loss to Georgia. And so you say, okay, Tennessee is legit. This is the game to find out if they are. And I think this Hooker kid will find out how real he is by playing a fully loaded Alabama defense.
Yeah, I was going to say you're going to learn a lot about him, and it is interesting to see, because, you got to think, if Tennessee's able to get a good showing and even a win, they'll catapult themselves right into the top 4. So, that's a big one. Looking at some other interesting ones in the top 25 before maybe we get on to some local stuff and all that, I can't help but know Jeff and I were talking about this, and I cannot believe this, Malik, but in their first year in the FBS, James Madison is now ranked 25th, and who were we talking about last week? It breaks into the top 25 there. Illinois at 24 as well. So Illinois, James Madison at 25 and 24 sneaking into the top 5. I know we talked a little about the Illini last weekend. Like, man, are they for real? Well, there they are getting their respect a little bit here this week.
I tell you, man, JMU, because we're in the New England area, I know you guys are familiar with the CAA, the A10, and how they've been dominant for years. That stadium is beautiful. I always thought, listen, why go up into a higher market when you can be the king of the market that you're in? This is the answer to that question. In the first year, they're going to finish in the top 25 most likely. The fan base down there in JMU is off the chart. Is one of the best places to play on the East Coast, up and down the East Coast. Obviously they're in the southern region. And I only suspect that they won't stop there. I would only imagine, because of the academic presence that JMU has, that they want to make a push to be in the ACC, the Atlantic Coast, because that's where they are. And so it will be interesting to see where they finish. And then, Jeff, to your point, look, I don't know if anyone can continue to hold their line, even to the point that we were just talking about. This could all unravel next week, and we're all like, what just happened? And so I think all of the teams that are in the top 25 again, or that are trying to peek into that bracket, including the Illini, I wish them all the best, because I love an underdog that becomes a top dog.
Absolutely here, and we'll turn to the smaller schools here. A couple things. First victory for Jordan Stevens, the University of Maine coach. They win at Hampton on the road. Big CAA victory there by a touchdown, 31-24. An all-Maine battle in Division III where we saw Hudson beat UNE for the lobster trap up in Bangor. And Bates gets their first win of the season, winning at Amherst here this weekend in NESCAC.
You know, guys, now I'm going to start backwards. I'm going to touch on Maine. Maine, my man, Coach Stevens. Shout out to Coach Stevens getting the first win on the road at Hampton University, who is a traditional HBCU school, and moving into the CAA. And so congratulations to him and to Coach Cohn getting his first win at Amherst. I'm ecstatic for him. I couldn't get that elephant off my back in my T here at Bates. All of the kids I recruited couldn't. So the fact that those seniors are culminating their first win with our troubled opening losses while I was there, and it being Coach Cohn's first win, I'm excited for those guys, and Maine as well. UNE, that was a tough one, a real tough one. Because I know they were in position, and we talked about it early on in the year. UNE, though they came off on fire, they had everything clicking. The defense was doing well. The run game and pass game was doing well. But Hudson, I mean, that's a tough league. It's hard to win. I don't care what league you're in. It's all relative. And so shout out to Hudson, and I'm sure UNE will recover. And as we keep it as local as we can, shout out to Lewiston. They got this big W last week as well. So kudos to Senior Night and Coach Versi.
You bet. All right, Malik Hall, the host of the Catching Up with Coach podcast and a former college football head coach himself. Thanks so much for joining us for another college football discussion. Can't wait for next week.
Take care, guys, and always keep it local.
You got it. Again, Malik Hall with the Catching Up with Coach podcast and a former college football coach. We will be right back. We'll take your phone calls again next. It's Middays with Mannix and Mick.
Okay, so yes, that was it. That was the Mannix brothers. And like I said before we got into this, I love the Mannix brothers. I love their intro. I love what they do. They give me an opportunity to broadcast to the wider state of Maine. And, more importantly, they recognize that there's some small time ball locally and collegiate coaches that need to be recognized and players. So shout out to Bates. Shout out to the Bobcats. Yeah, legal stuff. I don't know. Shout out to the Bobcats for getting their first win. Yeah, that was big, man. I was at a red light going nuts. Me and my son, I had just picked him up from his game. Unfortunately, Lewiston Middle did not get a W. And I picked him up from his game, and we just was losing it. We was watching it on the thing. We had a red light. All right, here it is. We had the red light going nuts. The light turns green, and we're like, oh, they did it. And then, and like, oh. And so we kept driving. So I do not recommend that you watch critical games on your dash with your son while driving. It just is not good. All right, so catch us back in. We'll come follow back up with Catch Up with Coach, the NFL edition. And again, my name is Coach Malik Hall. Catch Up with Coach, Sports Talk. Peace.